Welcome to Akakū. We are your public access station. We program cable channels 53, 54, and 55. We're a nonprofit, and we are mandated to air content from our resident base. So if you have a story to tell, we put it up on our channels. 53 is our government channel so that you can stay abreast and civically engaged with everything in our government here in Maui County. And we also offer resources to facilitate your voice, to tell your own stories, to put that to distribution. So if you're interested in learning about how you can get involved here, please reach out to myself and or any of the employees that you meet here today. I want to say that we're very blessed to have this opportunity to have received a grant from PBS's POV, American Documentaries and Dialogue. Today our agenda is going to be showing the film Wisdom Gone Wild, and it's a 16-year trajectory of a filmmaker who follows her mother's trajectory with the disease of dementia. And the film time is 1 hour and 10 minutes. We will come back to the room with a Q&A with our panelists who were generous enough to want to join us to talk story with the kuleana they have in this space. And that would be Rowena Dagdagandaya, Kathleen Couch, and Heather Greenwood. After, we will go put up a survey for POV. They'd like us to do a survey. If you're able to complete the survey, it really helps them to know how it's helped the communities of which they've granted the opportunity to do this type of a screening. Their program is about engagement, and that's pretty much what we do here at Akakū, is we try to engage our community in conversations around issues that matter. Akakū was founded on social justice and social change, and that's why we want to have each community have their voice heard, because that's how we make change in our communities. So we're right in alignment with what their program is about, and they offer grants to various other access centers and PBS affiliates all across the country to host screenings on films each season that are relevant to the issues happening in each community, and we felt very strongly about this one. The film synopsis is a tender cine poem. A filmmaker collaborated with her mother over 16 years, as I said, to confront the painful curious reality of wisdom gone wild in the shadows of dementia. Made over 16 years, the film blends humor and sadness in an encounter between the mother and daughter that blooms into an affectionate portrait of love, care, and relationship transformed. We didn't get the opportunity to have the filmmaker here, but I did do some research, and I found an article in Filmmaker magazine that came out just as it was launched in November on PBS and aired. So I want to read a little bit to set the stage before we go to the screening about this conversation they had with her. They asked her whether or not she had always planned to make a feature-length documentary about her mother, specifically the World War II incarceration. And she said, no, I had not. When my mother's dementia came on in 1997, I was about to travel to the Venice Film Festival for my own film, Strawberry Fields. I was devastated because we spoke excitedly about this day. But the next day, we were to follow up, and she had completely forgotten, to the point where she thought I was someone else impersonating her daughter. In '99, we had the formal diagnosis. In the beginning, everyone around me encouraged me to film the experience, but the idea seemed unethical and a violation of my mother's privacy. The first few years were overwhelming, depressing, and filled with grief. But I made a vow to continue to show up. I traveled sometimes once a month from New York to LA. I leaned heavily into my Buddhist practices. I sat with the loss and contemplated what it was that I was losing. I decided that with aging comes change, and you have to let go and accept loss as a part of life. Once I began the journey, something shifted. I discovered ways of connecting with my mother that were quite profound. I started to photograph her, which she enjoyed. She could become very present in the moment and expressive. We sent these to family and friends to share the process. Later, I started filming little clips with a point and shoot, and then my iPhone. To share, I ended up with a personal archive of fragments. It was not intended to be a full film back then. In 2014, I became very intentional. I had learned a lot about the disease then, and felt like I could share another perspective on living with dementia that others would find useful, one that was not part of the public dialogue around dementia and caregiving. I hired a DP, a director of photography, for 2 days, using money from a tax refund. Our shoot was all at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and that shoot went so well, I knew this would be possible. I felt an urgency now to make this film before it had become too late, but I had no funding. My mother was growing weaker. I remember asking one of my directors, what should I do? He said, by any means possible, film her and keep going, even if you make this on an iPhone. I got inspired, so I kept going. I'm going to read another excerpt. My personal work, though, was on hold. When you're stepping away from a career you've staked your identity on, you might feel adrift. You've lost your identity. But in that liminal space, I really began to see my life as not just about my career, and caring for another person took on greater importance. I learned some profound lessons about surrender and acceptance, human connection, and family. I actually thought that I could make a conventional observational documentary. I thought at first this would be realism, would be necessary. I hired an editor who worked that way, but the nature of the material was too fragmentary. So when you watch this, just watch for how she put this together. And I didn't like the results at first. I was also trying to avoid certain narrative cliches about dementia, like the tragedy, quote, she was once this amazing person, but look at her now, unquote. Or the mother-daughter redemption story. Those types of narratives are so constrained and couldn't contain all the things I wanted to touch on. So I stopped and started over. I decided to frame this around time travel in order to mirror my mother's logic, which was always jumping in and out of different eras, and how that gave me insight into her life. She talked about her ancestors. She shared stories about her past that I'd never heard before. Even if they were fabulation, they were fascinating in how they interconnected and intersected with key historical events and were meaningful. I lived this experience with my mother for 16 years. If anyone could tell this story, it would be me. Caregiving is often invisible. The people living with dementia are not well represented in films. I certainly had access, but I also didn't want to take advantage of this situation. Dementia is a complicated disease. It needs to be seen, and nuanced portrayals are necessary. Secondly, my mother was capable of objecting to the things she did not want me to do. She might argue she wasn't capable of understanding, but I disagree. Third of all, consent is not one and done. If I give consent to be filmed by someone and sign a piece of paper, does that make it okay a month later if I change my mind? Does the legal contract make it okay? We need to have formal protocols in place to protect people, but we also need to be careful about each situation. Actually, one festival rejected the film on the basis that they felt I created an exploitive representation of my mother and that she could not have been capable of giving her consent. I think my mother wanted me to succeed. That meant sharing a meaningful and important story to the world, told from a unique perspective. She and I constantly discussed filming and what I would be doing with the footage. On some deep level, my mother trusted me. She knew my films before she had developed dementia. I feel that a film about caregiving and dementia by default has to look honestly at the intimacies and intricacies of the process. It's not all fun and games, and it was necessary to acknowledge this. They asked her what was the takeaway that she hopes the audiences have to her film. She said, caregiving can be a profoundly life-changing experience. Yes, there is sacrifice, but there are lessons. There are stories, and they can provide deep connection and deeper insight. It is frustrating. It will foreground whatever tensions or difficulties already existed in the relationship. On the other hand, it is a lesson aside, setting aside one's ego in service to another person. It may not always be the right choice for some people. If you had an abusive, toxic relationship, maybe this will be too painful and impossible. If you are too triggered, it may not be healthy. While it was joyful and painful, I saw it as taking the time to acknowledge life itself. I had to deeply consider another person's well-being and the opportunity to make someone else's life meaningful and comfortable. So hopefully that sets the stage for what we're going to watch now. So enjoy the screening.
It's okay. Rhea, don't take my picture.
You want to take my picture? Look through here. You can take my picture.
Is that right?
Okay, now you have to ask me a question.
Didn't your mother show you how to break stick?
You're my mother.
Gee, nothing to do here.
Now, did your father come from Japan? Was he born in Japan or was he born in the
He was born in Japan.
He was born
so
in Japan.
what you call a Jap. My mama and papa grew strawberries.
Strawberries.
Yeah.
They had a strawberry farm, and it was probably taken away.
What about Vince Tajiri? There is no Tajiri. We have a father named Vince Tajiri.
No.
Mom, come to dinner. Mom.
You gonna hurt me?
No, I'm gonna take care of you.
You have to learn about yourself. Why I'm this way, why I'm that way.
And what are you learning about yourself?
Oh, you'll be surprised. You will be so surprised.
I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Rowena Dagdagandaya from the Maui County Office on Aging in the ADRC. We have Kathleen Couch from Maui Adult Daycare Centers. And we have Heather Greenwood from UH Faculty Extension from Manoa in the Intergenerational Aging Programs. I wanted to ask each of you to give a little Mana'oan story about, what you do and where you are with some of the issues in the space that we saw in the film, and maybe how the any takeaways from the film to start.
Thank you, Kat. I just wanted to first say thank you to you and the rest of the Akakū team for bringing this film out into the community and sharing it with all of us, and also for engaging our residents on Moloka'i and Lanai to take part in this screening. It's not very often that we see films like this, and when I first watched it a few weeks ago, I had an expectation that it would go in chronological order. So it was a little hard for me to understand it in the beginning. In fact, I had to watch it twice and pause a little bit. But when I saw it again last night, I had to watch it again last night. It really did make a lot of sense, and there are a lot of things that I connected with in the film, and it reminds me of my experience as a caregiver for both of my parents. I have my daughter here with me. Her name is Lauren. She's 11, and she also saw the progression of dementia with my father when before he was diagnosed formally in 2020 and up to his death in November of 2021. But it leads me to where I am today. I work at the Office on Aging, where I'm the county executive. I've been there since March 2022, shortly after my father passed away. But a few months before that, when I was still taking care of him, I left my job at another department and felt that the transition helped me spend more time with my parents as I was caring for them, and allowed me to also find my purpose in helping others understand and also be aware of issues with respect to aging, caregiving, and healthy aging in our community. The Office on Aging, as some of you may already know, we are a county agency, and we receive federal, state, and local dollars that we use towards services and programs in helping our kupuna ages 60 and over and their caregivers live in their homes as independently as possible. We have a staff of about 25. We have a 25 employee staff. We have program specialists and service specialists who do outreach in the community, where they'll go to senior meetings or do outreach events like the senior fair that we recently held, and share information about services out in our community. We also have information and referral service where people can call our office or drop by and learn about the different services available in our community. And we also conduct assessments to determine eligibility for services that we can authorize through our office. I want to thank Juno here. Juno is one of our program specialists. He's working on our 4-year plan, as well as the rest of our staff. And in that 4-year plan, we can identify the needs and the issues in our community that we want to be able to address and help caregivers and persons 60 and over get the services that they need so that they can live independently as possible. There's so much to say about the Office on Aging, but if you have questions about services, you can call our office at 808-270-7774 or visit our website at Maui County ADRC.org. We have a lot of information on our website as well. Now, let's see. Gosh, as I said, there's a lot to say. When I first watched the film, it did remind me of my experience with my dad, because there's so many similarities, just the mannerisms, the relationship that I developed with my dad through his diagnosis. And I think, when Kat and I and the rest of the team were talking about how it is we were going to do this presentation, one of the things we talked about were gaps. What are some of the gaps that we see? And I relate back to my experience. I think for me, it was the diagnosis part and trying to understand early on, and I don't know, maybe it's a blessing that we learned late. I don't know, but I wish I had known earlier so I could prepare myself and my family for what to expect in the years to come. We kind of had hints that my dad was going through something. And in Filipino, my mom always said, "Oh, he's kabao." Kabao meaning he's going crazy, or he's just getting old. But it wasn't. That's not the normal process. It started with forgetting his keys, and then it started with the paranoia. What was really troubling was when he was signing up for these things. People would be sending him things through the mail, giving him phone calls, saying, "Hey, Mr. Dagdag, you won $1 million. We're gonna need to do this." And that, when my dad would tell me about these things, he goes, "Oh, I'm gonna get my $1 million." I'm like, "No, Dad, that's not true." And he and I would fight all the time about it. And I think, in retrospect, I wish I had known more about how to engage with my dad and how to keep him safe. And that's one of the things that we at the Office on Aging, we work with the prosecutor's office, the police department, and other adult protective agency and other organizations on an elder justice team, where sometimes we get issues that come to our office, and then we'll work with the other agencies to troubleshoot and help the elder, the senior who is experiencing fraud, abuse, or neglect. So that's one of the services. But getting back to my experience, that was something that was concerning. And then at the very end of the movie, where Ria starts going, I can be your mommy. I feel like that's exactly what happened with me as well. And it's so real. I mean, it's still kind of new because Dad passed away in 2021. But I remember in his last days, just taking care of him. And he was in his bed, he was on oxygen. But and I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, but I remember when the doctor said, "Okay, you focus on quality of life." And that's what we did right after his diagnosis. We went fishing, the kids went walking with him. And I told myself, no fighting anymore. No fighting, no struggle. I tried to educate myself as much as I can. This is before I came on board at Office on Aging. I tried to educate myself as much as I can on dementia and understand that even all those experiences I had in applied behavior analysis, you can't change him. You just gotta kind of roll with it. And play along. That's what I did. And but in the end, he I felt like I was taking on the role as mom. He'll always be my dad. But it's like a circle, and I'm fortunate that my kids were also involved in the caregiving process, because my daughter would help with giving him his insure. In fact, they always joked around about how he would always tell her, "Oh no, you need the insure more than me." But she would help him with his food and all his meals. And my son, he was only 10 or 11 at the time, but he learned how to take blood pressure, because that's what we were monitoring. We were monitoring his heart, and we were there every day, along with my mom. And my mom, bless her soul, she was his main caregiver, and she was so tired. And I know a lot of you in here who are caregivers, I understand the feeling, how tired you are, how frustrated you are, especially when your loved one starts saying, "Who are you?" Or, "My wife's coming back, you shouldn't be here." I don't want her to think I have a girlfriend. But it was frustrating for her. And she was taking care of him while, and she didn't know this, while she was also battling stage 4 lung cancer. And so shortly after my father passed away, the focus went on my mom and caregiving for her as she battled through cancer. And she passed away 10 months after my dad. But from both experiences, I learned to focus on the quality of life and to also embrace the relationship that you have with your loved one and make the best out of it. If there's anything that my office can do to assist, please reach out and call us. We connect with other agencies like the Maui Adult Daycare. Thank God for Maui Adult Daycare. They offer caregiver support and counseling and respite services. Growing up, my mom was also a care home operator. So from 8 years old on, I mean, we were taking care of seniors who, who had dementia, who were struggling through mental health issues. And my mom did that for over 30 years. And we had a lot of residents who went through Maui Adult Daycare, and they did such a great job, and they always do, taking care of our loved ones, making sure that they get their needs, socialization and personal care, and of course the caregiving support. So I don't want to take up too much time, otherwise I'm going to go on forever. But I am sure with Kathy and the rest of the team at Maui Adult Daycare, I'm just so appreciative of the work that you all do. Yeah, thank you.
Mahalo, Rowena, for sharing your heartfelt experience. Really, mahalo for that. That really helps everybody see that this is happening here. It's happening in real time, not just in this film. And I did want to say, following up the panelists each having some time to talk, we will be able to take questions from the audience, from the room. When that happens, I will pass the mic if you have a story to tell. If you have a question, please speak loud. If you're watching virtually, please type it into the Q&A, and I will get it texted to me if you're on Molokai Lanai, or if you're just watching virtually. I'd like to pass it over to Kathleen Couch now.
Thank you. I am the program coordinator slash caregiver for Maui Adult Daycare Centers, and program coordinators because I help to oversee the centers. And caregiver is because we realize how important it is for caregivers to have a caregiver too. And so we look at you as a package, and the better that we can support you, then hopefully the care remains compassionate, but that you also survive it with the least amount of regret. And so we do support groups, counseling, right over the phone or in person. I facilitate 5 support groups across the island every month. And so the schedule is out there should you ever be interested. And my support groups aren't real structured. We talk story. Caregivers will, because it's like this, it's constantly changing and in and out of things. And so it's really it's hit and miss. It really, if I were to structure a support group, it may not be something that somebody needs. So we sit and talk story. Caregivers share about what they're going through, and then I throw in the tips and the advice and the understanding. Because what is really key with this is understanding. And this daughter seemed to really learn and have an amazing thought skill around that. And so Rowena and I sat back there watching this and tearing up through it and thinking, how do we talk after this? Because like Rowena, we can visualize our own experiences and what led us to where we are. And so the first time I watched this too, I felt like it jumped around so much that I had to watch it again. And then now we were at the point of crying. Because if you ever get the chance to see it again, I think, the more you watch something anyways, the more you see things that you might have missed, or you can, like Rowena said, you can put it in an order even though it's jumping around. And so what was happening there is when we have dementia, no matter what causes it, and there's over 100 different things that can cause it, as the brain is wearing down in the front, this is our warehouse back here. And as our brain is wearing down and we are going backwards in time, they're reliving the past. And so when she had wisdom spirit and they start talking, seeing people around them and talking to these people, it's amazing because I've had caregivers call me and say, Kathy, somehow my mom's brought spirits in the home and my home's haunted. And then I explain, no, it's actually that she's reliving her past. And so everything here, they start to go back through that, and it's now out here. And so we can't see it because it's their memory, but they're talking to people and seeing people there. And when somebody, I always tell them, well, if it seems to be a good interaction, then just let it happen. And if it seems to be upsetting to them, then you role play. Like Rowena said, you learn to do a lot of role play with your loved one with dementia. And when you role play, then you are going to start to say, okay, don't worry, Mom. If she starts saying, who's that man sitting there? I don't want him sitting there. He's staring at me. It's a past memory. And so it's just to say, okay, I'll take care of it, Mom. And okay, time for you to go home. You've got to leave because Mom needs to rest. Stand there and open the door and say, everybody out, and you have to go home. And then you take a minute, shut the door and say, okay, Mom, they're gone. I had them leave. I had an aunt who did that once. And she said, who are all these keiki in the room running around? They're supposed to play outside. And then who are these other people sitting here? And I said, well, I'm not sure. But she said, yeah, I don't want them running in here. I said, okay, I'll take care of it. And I got up and I said, I'm going to have them all leave. She said, no, you got to feed them first. Locals are like, they're that way. You got to feed them before you have them leave. I said, we did that already. They're done eating and now I'm going to have them leave. And so I opened the door and said, okay, time to go home. My auntie's got to rest. So you truly role play. But this was amazing in that you could really see how her mother was going in and out of time. But what was even more amazing, too, was how she could flow with that. And so it took practice to be able to do that. And I will say that attending a support group or calling for some support and walking you through that, it really takes understanding and learning to become so good at it that you could pat yourself on the shoulder and say, wow, I got this. And everything just flows. And then you don't feel like you're going so crazy. And what's important about that is then you start to be able to hold on to memories, gain memories for yourself, because for you it's going to be a memory, but everything you do with your loved one is going to be a quality moment. And so that's why it's important to flow with where they're at and remember that with dementia, you can't change them. You can only change yourself and the way that you interact and handle the situations. But I also feel dementia is kind of a miracle in itself too, in that you get to, when she said I would always ask Mom things about her past, but she'd never answer. And then all of a sudden she has dementia and she can do that. Dementia has a bit of a miracle in it, is the way I like to look at it, because you get to go back in time with them. And you get to, there will be accurate things. There will be some things that are not so accurate, but have fun with that. And I came into this field too. I think there's something that leads us to it because my mother was ill. In fact, my mother was Hawaiian, born into a family of 24 children, believe it or not. My grandmother had 3 sons and 21 daughters. And so I have over 200 first cousins from that family because my aunties all had large families too. But when my mother got sick, and my mother and I didn't get along as I grew. I think when you're raised in a large family like that, and I didn't understand it back then, you tend to have your favorites. And so as my mom and her sisters came along with their own families, they had their favorites as well. And my sister, firstborn with health issues, was my mom's favorite. I was second born, growing up feeling like nothing I ever did was good enough. And then my brother Danny, firstborn, was my mom's favorite. My other 3 brothers in between were kind of treated like me, and the baby, of course, was treated special. But that's something really hard to understand. So when I grew, I built a wall between my mom and I grew with that wall between us. And then years later, when she gets sick, my mother didn't believe in doctors. She had a simple bladder infection, never told my dad, and then it went to her kidneys, and she was in full-blown renal failure by the time he realized something was wrong. That led to her being in the hospital almost a month. They saved her life, but then she had a severe stroke and then was bedridden, had to be put on kidney dialysis. So for about 6 years beyond that, my dad caregave her, and my dad was my saving grace throughout my growing up. And so I can't tell you how many caregivers in my generation that I've come across in my support groups who say, I never got along with my dad and now I'm stuck with it. How could this be happening? And so I was a preschool teacher back then. There wasn't the understanding of dementia. My mother and her sisters took turns caring for my grandparents in their room. We didn't see it. I think there could have been a bit of an embarrassment. I'm not sure. So they had them in their room, and they would come and go into their room and spend nights, take turns with that. And they had a large enough family they could do that. And so we didn't see it. It was called senile. We never heard the word dementia. And then as my dad started to caregive my mother, she didn't want my brothers bathing her in bed or changing her catheter, and my sister wasn't capable of it. So it was me on Maui, and I thought, oh my God, what do I do now? My concern was my dad and his survival. So as a preschool teacher, I would fly back to Honolulu on a Friday after work and take care of my mom and give my dad a break, and then I'd fly back Monday morning to go to work. And I would do that for a long period of time until my mom was doing well enough that I could just back away. And I was lucky because my spouse Joe was such a support to me, so understanding, and took care of everything while I was there and helped support me. So it's important that you have someone to support you as well. And I'll cry. But it was really hard because here I didn't have the attachment. And so I did have to help care for her, though. And so my feelings were, how am I stuck with this? And all these crazy behaviors. My mother was that way. She was talking about her ex-boyfriends and an ex-boyfriend in particular that she was supposed to marry. And I'm wondering when David's coming. And how the heck can you do that when Dad's in there? I said, that's wrong, Mom. You can't do that. And then she'd ask him for something to eat, and he'd go cook it, and he'd bring it back, exactly what she asked for. And as soon as he brought it back, it would be, I didn't want that. I didn't ask for that. And she'd get so angry. And my dad kind of thought she had gained this sort of ESP kind of thing, because she would know when somebody came in her house, and her bedroom door was here in front of her and her bed here. And when somebody would come in the house, she'd watch she could know whether they were going in the kitchen or the living room, and she'd start screaming, get out of my kitchen. Don't go in my kitchen. And we would think, how the heck does she know? The day he moved some furniture around in a hutch that had a mirror in it, we realized, oh my God, she's looking out the bedroom door and seeing everybody coming in the front door. So you learn a lot. And I think what that leads is to know that you have to find the humor in all of this too. And you will come across a lot of funny things. You'll come across a lot of odd things and angry things. And I do want to point out, when I saw her hit the doctor, it drives me crazy when somebody says that's abuse, when their loved one's hitting them, or they're attacking someone, swearing, punching them, screaming at them, pushing them, pinching. It's not abuse. Abuse is something that a person makes a purposeful choice to do. With dementia, they don't know that they're doing it. The term is combative. And so I do have families that also ask when their loved one, there have been extreme combative cases that could be very dangerous. A person with dementia could really severely hurt someone or kill them and not realize that they've done it. Because once it's done, I've had families say, oh, we called the police, and when the police got there and Dad had done this to Mom, and then he'd say, oh no, I never did that. I would never do that to her. It truly was gone. So I caution families that if you have a loved one with a lot of agitation and combativeness, then one, you've got to work with the doctor and let them know it's hard for you to work with them if you don't have them, not on a pill that knocks them out, but something that calms and takes the edge off of it so that you can provide for them and interact and care for them. And then the other thing is you want to give information. You want to call the police department and let them know your loved one has dementia and some extreme agitation and can become combative, because if you had to call them, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm hearing it more and more, that people are saying, call the police on them. But let the police know ahead of time what your loved one is going through, so that if you had to call, then they're going to handle them differently. They're not going to manhandle them or be rough about it or know that the proper place is jail, because it's not. So get it on file so that they know what's going on. But this, after I watched this again and then today even, this is like the perfect image of what dementia's like. Because the first time I saw it, like I said, I went a little stir crazy thinking, wow, it really jumps around and I can't keep up with it. And then I had to watch it again, and then this time just broke us down. It made us cry. But it's important that you learn everything that you can. Maui Adult Daycare Centers is set up to take care of a loved one. What caregivers don't realize is your loved one going through those changes is isolated at home. Everything is dependent upon you to get them out in a car and do things with them. And so families many times will say, I don't want to force them to go, and they say they don't want to. You have to know that they no longer know what's in their best interest. And so you do want to reach out to get something in place that helps them to continue to live and enjoy life. And that's what we do. When you saw the daughter going back in time with her to enjoy conversations, and I think my most favorite thing was all the old songs that they would sing and the music to it and how she'd hum it, because that's real key at daycare. We play a lot of the old time music and do sing-alongs. Our karaoke has a lot of the old time music, and staff will dance with them. Dancing with your loved one is such a nice way, especially when it's your spouse, to just feel that closeness and intimacy again when they no longer remember you. And it's not a thing of saying, would you like to dance? It's my favorite song, dance with me, and take their hand and stand them up and dance. That brings enjoyment to them, and again, a wonderful memory for you. But music is really key, looking at the photo albums like they did, being whoever they think you are, because they will, if you look similar to a past loved one, like her daughter, she kept calling her by her sister's name because she must have looked like her and resembled her. And she sometimes corrected her, but I think she came to realize at the point that she could no longer do that, and she just role played that. So you can become whoever they think you are. And when you go against anything they say to you, what that does is create a paranoia and a suspiciousness about you, so that they don't trust you. Oh, you make me look bad because you don't believe what I'm saying. You think I don't know what I'm talking about. You're trying to make me look stupid. So you have to float with them so that they maintain that trust in you. And definitely enjoy them. I tell our staff all the time, we train our staff every month and we keep them abreast of things so that they're the best that they can be at what they do too. And so when you are role-playing with them, store those memories, and like I tell staff, treat them as if nothing is wrong with them, because one, they can feel when you're treating them differently, as if there is something wrong. So you need to treat them as if there isn't. And then just keep enjoying them and doing those things. And two in that is you truly don't want to miss the moment that they're themselves again. And there are spurts of that sometimes with someone. Sometimes I have caregivers who thought their loved one were doing things on purpose because they're back here and then all of us, and they can't do the things they used to do. Mom, fold the clothes or set the table. And she's standing there but can't remember what to do. And then all of a sudden at another time, she can, and she's doing it. And the daughter goes, "What's wrong with you? I mean, I always ask you this and you can never do it." I had a daughter who took her mother to the doctor because of that. And when she got there, the questions the doctor asked, Mom was able to answer everything. And then when she said, when the appointment was over, Kathy, I was so angry. I thought I better not say anything because I'm just too mad right now. Got her in the car, got her home, went and got her a snack and a drink and sat down and said, Mom, I ask you questions and you can't answer me, and I tell you to do things and you can't do it. But in that doctor's office, you answered everything. So I know that you're doing this on purpose. And when she asked me that at a support group, I told her, truthfully, they're going backwards in time, but something can spark up here for a bit. They're also trying their best to present well around others. It's not going to last, but we all were raised to be on our best behavior around others. It's our generation. And so they do that too. And you could see that with Mom until she progressed more. And then it just became more fun. I try to say, look at all the humor, because it doesn't have to be so horrible. It can be a lot of fun. And I believe every caregiver could write a book of the journey they've been through with their loved one after you're done with that. And when Rowena says that her children were part of the caregiving role and helped, sometimes families have the impression of, I don't want to burden my kids. I don't want them to go through this. But remember that your children are going to be your caregivers someday. So they need to be able to work alongside of you at some of those times and understand it, understand the changes with aging, understand the dementia. And we're modeling to them. We're not modeling perfection because we're human. We are trying to model love and how to be with them, but we're also modeling that we can get frustrated and angry sometimes too. We can make mistakes, and then how to pick ourselves up and look at that choice that day and, gee, what could I have done differently? And then maybe tomorrow try something different, but look at every day as a new day. But teach our youth as we go along, which is why Maui Adult Daycare Centers also finds it important to educate the youth in the schools and then to invite them in and have them come and interact. And I've had students come in and say, oh my gosh, I want to take that one home. They fall in love with them. But I had another student come in the office one day as they were out there on the floor and said, Kathy, is that what's going to happen to me? And I said, you are way too young to worry about that. She was only 17. I said, you're way too young to worry about that. I said, so all you really need to do is, she said, I don't think I can do that. It's too scary for me to see it. I said, and it's okay if you want to stay in here, if you want to go up front. I said, going through this and being exposed to it just teaches you about what can happen with our elder loved ones and the level of care, the type of care that they need. But a number of months later, she graduated, and a number of months later, I was doing a talk for a nursing class at the college. And there she sat at the end of the table, waving hello to me as I talked about dementia and daycare and things like that. And then afterwards, she came up and gave me a hug. And I said, what are you doing here? Thought you weren't going to go into nursing. She said, I went back out there and I tried it again. And she said, after you explain things the way that you did to me, that, why I always explain in the class before they come so they know what they're going to be seeing. But she needed a little more time. And taking that time with her helped her to be able to look at it again and put herself in there and realize it's not the true person, it's the illness that you're seeing. And you're seeing what their needs are. And she said, and now I want to go into this field. And so it's important to us at daycare as well to educate our youth. So don't have any of your grandchildren or children or anybody step away from it. Let them be a part of it. We all want to believe that when it's us one day, and it could be, that we have educated everyone the best that we can and that we are going to get care, the best care that we can too. And I'm such a strong believer of what goes around comes around, and an eye for an eye. But I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Heather, and then we're definitely here for questions after. My support group schedules and daycare brochure is out there with the phone number, and so I can counsel right over the phone, as I said. You can join a support group. My support groups are open. And then we also bring, instead of a full-blown workshop, because it's hard to find locations, we bring a speaker to the support groups quarterly. There is no cost ever, thanks to Office on Aging, for the caregiver support, but that's my role, is to support you. And so call anytime. I will say, and then look into things to get your loved one into, because although she went through all of that and they cared for mom, it's important you step away and take breaks and renew your own spirit. And daycare will love and provide the personal care to your loved one and provide the activity and enjoyment. Wear them out a bit so that when they get home later, they're ready to go to bed. I mean, they sleep better at night. But, their moods change too, because they have purpose again. And that's what's missing when they're just sitting at home. But thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Kat. I appreciate it.
I wanted to real quick, before we pass it to Heather, is I did get a question from Tina virtually about, since you both mentioned watching the film more than once. You can watch it by just Googling Wisdom Gone Wild. It will bring up the POV PBS site. It was released late November for viewing online, so you can now view that online if you want to watch it. Now let's go to Heather.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Heather Greenwood, and I am Cooperative Extension faculty with UH Manoa. Even though Manoa is on Oahu, thankfully I work in Maui County, and so my goal my responsibility with Cooperative Extension is to take the research and information that is taking place on campus, as well as at other land-grant universities across the country, and bring educational programs into the community that support families and that improve the quality of life. And so my area is aging and intergenerational programs, and some of the projects that I have been involved with have been very closely with Maui County Office on Aging and Maui Adult Daycare. I work a lot with grandparents who are raising grandchildren, as well as family caregivers. And with the university, we do like data. We like information, but really one of the things that's most important is the story behind that data and that information. And so this was a beautiful, many different stories that were taking place. And one of the stories that we hear ongoing is that that families, caregivers, grandparents who are raising grandchildren need many resources. Often, though, the resources may be in the community, but they may not know about them. And so working collaboratively as agencies to identify not only the needs and the gaps, but also connecting the information with the families is critical. And so as part of my job, I write a monthly column in the Maui News. It's called Aging Matters. It's generally in the third weekend of the month. And this year, because we know that one of the gaps is that gap in understanding what community resources are available, so this year we will be focusing each month on resources in the community organizations that provide those resources. And in February, we will be kicking off this series by providing information about Maui County Office on Aging. Throughout the year, we will also I'll also be interviewing and writing a story about Maui Adult Daycare and a lot of other resources. I had mentioned stories, and I believe that we connect with one another through stories. And this was a beautiful story. My story and the way that I came into working with older adults and their families is by experience. My mother was a caregiver for her father. And so, Lauren, is that your name? I'm so glad that you're able to be here with your mother and that you were able to learn from watching her and being a part of that caregiving process. And the next story that I came upon that related to aging was when I was in college, and I was taking an older adult course, and one of the PhD candidates who was in the photography department had done his dissertation portfolio on his caregiving experience with his grandmother and grandfather, who both had dementia. And so he shared much of his portfolio stories. That was one of the most impactful 1-hour classes. These stories just are all a part of the richness that is families. And so I forgot where I was going to go with that. I was going to talk some of the stories that I found, do you want me to talk a little bit about some of my personal emotions that came up? I had to write them down because I would forget them. And one of the things that I loved that she said at the beginning was that we needed to slow down and to listen. And in that slowing down and in that listening, we will hear stories, and we will learn much more. And let's see, there are a lot of, another thing that I noted was that there was a lot of continuity that I noticed across Rose's life. Every picture that you saw her nails, they were beautifully manicured. When her hair was being cared for, she would close her eyes and just kind of be back in a different time with her career. There were a lot of those things that are continuity throughout the life, and I noticed that the daughter would connect with the stories that were behind those important pieces. And so just thank you very, very much for this opportunity to be here. Thank you to both of these ladies. And there are a lot of other community resources that are available to help family caregivers.
Great. I want to get to a couple questions that are floating in from the virtual feed that people are on. Someone on Lanai says, does the Office on Aging also help support children of Kupuna who are on the mainland by answering questions of how they can help from afar? It's hard to help my parents when I'm so far away, and sometimes I don't know who or where to go to get help.
Absolutely. We are here for all caregivers, even those who are distant caregivers. In fact, I had a discussion with one of my staff who was answering questions for a caregiver who's in Japan, whose mother currently lives on Maui. So it's making sure that they, there's that connection and that they have the support that they need, and that they can also find support for their loved one here on Maui. So we do have services that are available even if they are caregiving at a distance.
There's a couple other questions. Great, thank you for that. Let's see, will Lanai Island ever have this type of service? And I believe that came in while Kathy was talking, but maybe each of you can talk about your services and whether or not you're already on Lanai, or if you have any intention of bringing services directly to Lanai.
Well, I know there has been an effort on Lanai for adult day health, and through Lanai Kinaole, and that's a conversation that we continue to have with Val, the executive director. I understand too that there is also an effort to get an adult residential care home on Lanai. There has been a lot of discussion with the Executive Office on Aging on providing those and supporting those kinds of services on the island. In fact, I know in this legislative session, there is a bill that we're monitoring along with the Executive Office on Aging on long-term care, because long-term care is a very big issue in our rural areas, not just Lanai, but Molokai as well. A lot of we hear stories from caregivers who oftentimes they're at the point where their loved one needs advanced care. And so the decision whether, to keep them on the island or have them come to Maui and be placed at adult residential care home or hale makua. Those are the types of decisions that these families are having out in the rural areas. So with legislation, I believe it calls for like additional study and but also understanding what the challenges are in establishing long-term care in our rural areas. So the question again, will there ever be a service on Lanai? I know there's efforts right now, and I understand too that there's going to be a lot of discussion on how it is that we bring those services, but we do know that is that need on the island.
So it's in the future. It's not happening currently that you know of.
With the actual facility, not at this point. But there is an effort towards bringing those services in those areas.
How about you, Kathy, your services?
I know before COVID, I used to go over and take workshops and run some of the support groups. And there was talk that they were looking into opening an adult daycare, putting one together, opening it, and doing it at the recreation hall at the Halemahaolu site. But I don't know whatever happened with that, because shortly after hearing that, then COVID hit. And so I think it's like Rowena said, I think it would be reviving those thoughts and ideas and meeting as a community and then bringing it up to the county officials and meeting and making their needs known. I do want to say caregiver support-wise, anyone on Lanai or Molokai can call me and I can support them right over the phone. As I said, because we're in partnership with Office on Aging, and they created my position years ago before I came to it, that I'm able to provide counseling and support to anyone living on Lanai and Molokai. I've gotten calls from Japan and Australia and the mainland because families will call me and tell me their loved ones are struggling and can't find any support. So I actually get calls from different places in the world, in the U.S., and support them right over the phone. And I ran that through Office on Aging, who was very open and said, yes, go ahead and support them.
That's awesome.
I also wanted to add that on Molokai, we also have adult daycare through Nā Pu'uwai. They're one of our providers. And we also have a congregate program on both islands, Lanai and Molokai. So that's an opportunity for seniors to gain socialization while having a meal at the same time. But my understanding too is that some of the families may kind of hesitate in having their loved one participate in a congregate or an adult daycare program. And it could be for cultural reasons, being able to care for your loved one in your own home, or just not thinking that's the appropriate thing. And I think Kathy had mentioned it earlier where, sometimes you struggle in having your loved one go in the morning that they don't want to go, but really it's an opportunity for them to socialize and take part in activities and be part of the community. Mm-hmm. So with those opportunities, try it out.
I think it's important too that it starts with you as the caregiver rethinking things and getting beyond the idea that I'm forcing my loved one to go, but telling yourself, no, I'm actually going to place my loved one in a setting that's going to help them to live and enjoy life, bring sparks of moments that are happy moments back to them, put them around others where they can socialize if they're capable of that, or staff will be interactive with them. But we do when you saw what the daughter did, we do a lot of reminiscent things with the singing and the dancing to the old time music and playing bingo and giving prizes. What is different, I'll tell you a funny bingo thing is all of our other centers can do 3 or 4 bingo games and say, okay, that's it, somebody might win next time. And our Ocean View Center, because they're more moderate high functioning, staff has to have enough prizes and play to the end so that every single one is won. Because when they used to try to stop, they'd go, you guys are so chicken. And I didn't win yet. So that's not fair. So we have them go to centers that are at their level so that we can provide activity that meets the needs at the level that they're at. But they've lost their purpose when they're sitting in a home. And truthfully, it's like sitting there waiting to die. And families think putting on the TV, caregivers don't mean to be hurtful, but they think they can put on TV and things like that and fill their day. Think of what TV used to be for them. It was black and white. It was very slow paced and simple, and there was no gore to it. There was no killing and everything. It was very, very simple and different, and they can keep up with it a bit more because it's slow paced. So that's that we channel. But anything now, there's so much killing and swearing and violence, and it's too fast paced. Even some Disney movies, believe it or not, with the witches and things like that can be scary for them too. So in daycare, we really try to excel in everything being appropriate to where they're at and what's good for them, and getting them out and having them feel that purpose again, and celebrating the holidays. So we do all that. We celebrate their birthdays. We do a May Day at every center where we choose a king and a queen and a court and bring in entertainment. So again, it's helping them to live life so that you can step out and take breaks and renew your spirit and survive this.
It's very interesting because I want to get to Heather on programming for Lanai, the Outer Islands. It sounds like we're identifying a gap. Mm-hmm. And that was part of my hope in this conversation is for the community to bring to your services to say, hey, is this available to us? And we're seeing the Outer Islands, obviously not. Heather, do you have a comment on that?
So one of the educational programs that we do in collaboration with the Maui County Office on Aging is an evidence-based 6-week program called Powerful Tools for Caregivers. And the focus is not on how to provide that care, but how the caregiver cares for themselves, sets goals so that it is they're able to manage the stress and have outlets that allow them to continue. Many of the caregivers who have come into it have put their own needs on the back burner because they feel like that's less selfish, and we reorient and talk about how taking self-care is really an investment for being there the long haul. So for your answer to your question, we do have that program that has been on all of the islands as well as out in Hana. Prior to COVID, it was in person for 6 weeks in a row. We took a little hiatus during COVID. However, one of the things with COVID is that we all become much more versatile in virtual programs. And so during COVID, the virtual Powerful Tools for Caregivers also became available. And so in those ways, we're able to meet both the virtual and the in-person needs of some of the caregivers.
I have a couple more questions. Looks like Lanai is lighting up, which is good. This is what we hope for by having the opportunity. This is the first time Akakū has been able to offer a program from our studio here in real time to the Outer Islands through the technology you're talking about. When will Lanai have a daycare or a facility to handle aging? Is there, there's a few more here too as well, but is there any timeline? Is this in the works, or is this, as you said, it's needs to go through a legislative process, it needs to have conversations because we know how far away a real brick and mortar or actually, creating that reality is. Is there anything in the works for something like that in not just Lanai, let's say the Outer Islands?
Like I mentioned earlier, I know Lanai Kinaole had, they were working towards establishing an adult day health and daycare program. So there has been an effort to obtain funding. There's grant funding available through the county. But with many organizations, it's the planning that needs to take place. So there's, I understand Val is trying to work hard on that, along with other organizations. I want to look more into that Halemaho'olu. I hadn't heard about that one, I guess because it's before COVID, but I mean, that's another opportunity as well. So funding is also a very big issue. Some of the other challenges perhaps in establishing facilities is staffing. And throughout the country, there's a nationwide shortage on home community based healthcare, workers. So when we think about education and encouraging our youth to take on jobs in healthcare and home care, I mean, that's an area that we're trying to encourage. And I see a lot of efforts in the high schools through their HOSA program. I don't know the acronym, but there's that big push towards healthcare, educating our high school students and middle school students about healthcare. And then also integrating some of the studies so that they, if you're looking at computer programming, robotics, or engineering, how can that also lead into supporting seniors out in the community? You could create a robot. You could develop homes that are adaptive so that you can age in place. Like just when my son was looking at a career pathway class at Maui High School, he said, I want to take up architecture, or I want to take up engineering. Okay, great. If you take up architecture, maybe you can learn how to create a home so that seniors don't fall in their homes. So, but going back to when is that going to take place, I don't have an answer to that, but I do know that it's going to need we'll need to have that discussion with providers, understand what the workforce capacity is, and also see where we can get the funding for establishing a facility and sustaining it.
And that question, it specifically asked about daycare. Do you have any comments, Kathy, as to anything coming down the pipe or that you know of? I think we will aggregate, if you could send me the organizations you have been talking about, that I can put it out in an email to all the registrants, some of the resources we're talking about here that may currently exist.
I don't, other than what Rowena has already said, and they would probably, being the HUD of care, they're the go-to resource. I think that what Rowena said is probably the best that we can say. I think it would be good, though, for them to contact maybe Molokai, who is going through the same things that they do with the shortages of programs, and talk with the director there and people that helped put that one together and see how they did it. Because they deal with the same problems.
Yeah, how about you, Heather, with the programs? We're talking about education and getting a workforce. Mm-hmm. I do know that Hawaii State currently has close to 22% over the age of 60, and they're projecting by 2030, 27% or more will be over 60 years old. So this is obviously an area that needs growth, and growth quickly, particularly in areas like the rural outer islands. What do you know about education and programming and daycare for the outer islands?
Not specifically daycare on the outer islands. One of the things that is so important is to bring these concerns to elected officials. And so knowing who your county council, I know the county council are very, very willing, open. They want to receive information and feedback from their constituents, as well as at the state and the federal level. So I would encourage you to talk, to tell stories, to share what is challenging, share what would be helpful, and start that conversation. A lot of times it's not a comfortable conversation because it is meaning that we're losing independence. and it's getting a little bit closer to the end of life. But those stories and us talking will bring those issues even more to light.
Yeah, and it is an election year, so lest we forget, particularly everyone on the outer islands that's tuning in or virtually, I think that's a really good thing to remember, is that talk to the people who are helping push these initiatives forward. Let's see, we have a couple more questions, and then I'll open it up to the room, but if we go a little over time, I'm happy to do it because this is also important, is this engagement. If someone is on Medicare, this is from Lanai as well, or doesn't have the correct medical program, how does that all play into treatment for aging? Does anyone have any, I know that might be more of a medical provider type question, but is there anything you have to say to that question that you can know? Can you repeat that again? If someone is on Medicare or doesn't have a correct medical program that they're on, how does it all play into treatment for aging? Let's say for your services, is that how it's provided, or is it all is the funding for the services you currently are doing, is that done through, is there cost to them, or is it does it have to go through a medical provider? Perhaps that's more close to what you could answer to.
Yes, in order to be eligible for our services, first thing we need to do is conduct an assessment. One of the first questions we ask is if there are other types of insurance, or if Medicaid, if they've already been receiving services through other government government programs. So that would be one. That's one way that they could receive services. But if they're not receiving services through other means, then those that we can provide, they might be eligible for it. But again, we just need to conduct an assessment and determine what the seniors' needs are. But it's free of charge. There's no cost. Contributions are voluntary, though, to our providers. But yeah, in terms of Medicare, they can call our office and engage in a conversation with one of our specialists, and we can see what services would be appropriate for them.
How about you, Kathy? The daycare, is that something, how is that paid for?
We are the lowest cost daycare facility island-wide. Everywhere else it's much higher than what we charge. And cost for someone who's level 1, still pretty independent, does everything on their own, but they can't be left home alone, is $64 for the whole day, almost 12 hours of care. And cost for somebody who's level 2 is $68 for the whole day. If you brought someone in the home, the care could be good. It could run you $35 or more an hour, and what's missing is the social aspect and the ability to live and enjoy life. Somebody who's level 3 is $74 for the whole day, almost 12 hours of care. So we provide all the personal care, all the activity, everything's inclusive. Medicare, unfortunately, won't cover the cost for it. VA doesn't cover the cost for it either. We've tried to bring the awareness to them of the importance of there is that level in the middle where somebody can still attend a facility which keeps them living at home longer, and they can still enjoy doing things in the center. But Medicaid will cover the cost for everything, but who is huge for us is Maui County Office on Aging, because they will kick in scholarship. And they will help with 2 or 3 days out of the week, which, even though our cost is low, it can still be a struggle because no one thought we would become our parents' parents, so to say, and start to have to take over their care and pay for that, which is why we work so hard to keep costs low. Maui County Office on Aging helps us to do that. They provide scholarship. We also have a few other scholarship sources. So the best I could say, Medicare doesn't cover it. And sadly, when somebody's just over that $1,200 threshold by a few dollars, you're not considered poverty, so you're probably Medicare, and we know you can't even pay rent on $1,200. And so It's talking with Office on Aging. I tell caregivers to do a spend down, put down where the cost is going, where their money is going, so you can prove that that's being spent and it's in their care. And then you can also get a letter from the doctor that says, my loved one can't be left home alone and needs 24/7 care for their safety and well-being, and then you can reapply for Medicaid. I wish Medicare did more, but they don't. It is Medicaid who will cover, and then Office on Aging, if you call them, then they're definitely a good start. That's the best start you could do, who will refer you out and tell you how to go about all these things that would qualify you and cover cost.
Before I go to Heather, I just want to say that that's very frightening. That there's a gap in Medicare when you're paying for Medicare, and that you have to qualify for Medicaid, and just a few dollars pushes you out of the ability for help. Because I understand that the services must be amazing, and that would be a load. That would be a financial load for somebody, particularly for a family. If you're raising a family and you have that extra cost, that was out of pocket, unexpected and not covered. Heather?
So most of our programs are at no cost thanks to grants, federal, state, and local grants. And I'm going to go back to the Aging Matters column. I am always asking people what topics they would like to be covered. And I was actually speaking with my dentist yesterday, and he said, please include something about Medicare and Medicaid and what is the difference, and what do each of these cover. And so that will be an upcoming news article and a connection to where you can get more Medicare and Medicaid information.
And I want to say that I'm trying to encourage Heather to do a podcast of the same nature, to put it out both to television and to radio and various platforms. So hopefully this year we'll be able to do that. We have a couple more that have come in from Mapuana. Maui Adult Daycare providers service to Kapuna and Hana. However, we really need support for caregivers, such as support groups, etc. I belong to a support group on Oahu, which has really been good for me. Ongoing education is helpful for us. This forum has been beneficial. This film should be shown as often as possible. I'm a full-time caregiver. My mother was diagnosed with dementia with late onset Alzheimer's. She requires 24-hour care. Mahalo to all of you for what you're doing. I think maybe speak to the Hana for caregivers. What they really need out in Hana, it sounds like while they have service for Kapuna, they lack support for caregivers. Any comment? I believe you have some
We do. I'm not
information.
sure if they're aware, but there is a caregiver support group in Hana. And Timmy, through Halihulu Mamo, is responsible for the caregiver support group there. And then anyone from Hana can also call me for that one-on-one counseling. But Timmy does do it's the third Thursday of every month, I believe, at 10 o'clock.
Great. Here's another question, then maybe we have a few from the room. Cheryl virtually asks, mahalo nui, Kat and Akakū for today's screening and talk story. Aloha Kathy, Heather, and Rowena. Nice to see you all, and mahalo for sharing your personal stories. I can certainly relate, having been a caregiver for my dad. Is there currently a wait list for services such as personal care, respite, or home-delivered meals at this time? If yes, how long is that wait list?
I can answer that one. So we do have a wait list for things like homemaker and personal care services, and mainly because of that workforce shortage. So trying to build that capacity in our community has been quite a struggle for many of our providers. But we're hopeful that with education and also just reaching out more or helping our providers with employment fairs, getting the word out, that more people would consider a job or a career in home community-based services. For things like home delivered meals, there's no wait list. We have Kaunoa Senior Services that provides Meals on Wheels. And one of the great things about Meals on Wheels is that it's daily, and they also they conduct checks when the drivers go to the homes. So there's that personal interaction, and many of my staff have participated in ride-alongs with the Kaunoa staff. I have, and it's in my experience, there have been seniors who come out and say, "Oh, thank you for the meal. You're the only one that comes and visits me." And that's the sad reality in our community, that many of our seniors don't have somebody to rely on. And oftentimes it's that driver from Meals on Wheels who they have a relationship with that helps them. And the drivers also recognize signs. They're trained. So if someone's not answering the door, sometimes they go into that first responder mode. So that service in our community is really, really important. But yes, call our office. If meals is a need, then we can assist in that way.
So there is a wait list for some services, and how long is that wait list? Did you mention that?
It varies. It depends on capacity, and sometimes it's area driven. So and sometimes if the senior has a preference for one organization over the other, that might also contribute to a wait list as well. So, but for the most part, we try to encourage the seniors who are authorized services, hey, try this service. Another thing that we have through the Office on Aging is an in-home respite and homemaker reimbursement program. And we have partnered up with Naho Aloha who is overseeing that reimbursement program. We pay, I believe, up to $20 per hour per unit, so that the senior can find a provider. So if it's a homemaker type of situation that they need, then they can be reimbursed for $20 per hour, so that they can find somebody who can provide that service in their home. Same for respite as well. So there's that kind of, if there's no other service available through either Hale Mahaolu or Ho'okele, then we can also offer that reimbursement program through Naholoha.
How about a waiting list for any services on your end, Kathy?
There's never been a waiting list for daycare because of that cycle of life. We have them where families will have them with us until what happens is they either burn out at home, and then they look for placing them into a foster home or a care home or Halemakua, Kula Hospital. They're with us. We have families who want them right there till the end, and we can't provide a higher level of nursing care, but we can definitely care for someone who can no longer walk, talk, feed themselves anymore. But there's never a wait list, because if it isn't that, then our clients pass away because they are at that older age. So they're with us right up to the end sometimes.
Heather, how about your programs? How often are they run, and what areas, and how can people access? Is there, do you ever reach capacity?
We generally don't reach capacity, and often our ability to hold the classes is dependent upon myself and some volunteers. I do have a call to action, because I feel like a lot of times when we're talking story, we're watching something, we want to do something. And so for caregivers, we know that it's challenging to, the workforce is not always there to provide all of the resources. So for caregivers, I encourage you to identify one person that you can call and say, will you come and sit with my loved one for an hour so I can go do something? For those who are not caring, talk to your neighbors, your friends, your family members, and find one or two things that you can do. Can you make a meal and share it with a loved one? Can you go in and talk story so that someone else has some time off? So being part of our island community, we are very resilient, and I think a lot of that comes from the community reaching out and for people asking for what they need.
I'm curious about the education. Is Mahi on Molokai from MEO, who I was working with as a partner to bring this event over there, was saying that she believed that there might be like certifications, like they're trying to get more people into the caregiver field that isn't a long track of educational training, that might have certifications or you know, like academic tracks of 1 or 2 years. Are you, any of you, aware of how they're trying to build this caregiver community?
So the University of Hawaii is a system. So there are 8 or 9 campuses. Maui College has a lot of certificate programs. They have the nursing program. They also, I believe, still have the certified nursing assistant program. They have several different certificates that relate to human services, gerontology. There are a lot of the career and technical education. And so I would encourage anyone to reach out to some of the academic counselors and find out what programs. They can be short-term. Some may only take a semester. There are also a lot of community education programs that are offered through some of their outreach that they can take for short-term training.
That's interesting because we've identified 2 gaps. We've identified just services on the outer islands for our county alone, just Maui County. And we've also identified capacity and staffing and qualified people. I want to ask this question myself, is that what about somebody who has, like the filmmaker talked about toxic or abusive relationship to somebody, and they just don't have the capacity. They just don't feel they can do that job. Is that when they would look at putting them into somewhere else, a nursing home, so to speak?
I remember one specific thing that the filmmaker said is that they did have to move the mother into an assisted living facility, and that is a really difficult situation to be in. I remember when my mother had to go through that, there are a lot of feelings that people have about long-term care, and she felt a lot of guilt, but it came to the point that her father was 6'3" and she's 5'2", and he kept falling. It was a safety issue. And so looking at any types of moves as safety, identifying our own capabilities and our limitations, and focusing on what is the best care, how, if I as a caregiver am to injure my back, what will then happen to my loved one? And so having open conversations with the family, that's not going to take care of the shortages that we are experiencing, but to identify that there are needs, there are times that care may not be able to be done at home 100%, and that there are resources that can bring people in or look for other housing and safety options.
I also wanted to add too that many years ago, I had that talk with my parents about, you know, what happens when you get older, and what do we do? And both my parents always said, I want to die at home. And for me, that was a wish that I was fortunate enough to help grant. And at the Office on Aging, we have a book that we give to many of our participants called 5 Wishes. And in that book, the participant can identify how they want to be treated, what kind of treatment that they would like to receive, even to like the types of music that they want to listen to when they can no longer care for themselves. So that's available through our office, and I would encourage families to look into that book and to also be able to have discussions with their loved ones before it's too late, to identify what those needs are so that you can prepare yourselves for when that time comes and make those kinds of decisions. This is how I'm going to plan financially and emotionally and physically. This is where I'm going to be.
And I always, as I support caregivers, I really try to look at where the caregiver's at too and what it's like for them. And I can't tell you how we have seen caregivers pass away before their loved one. And we have seen caregivers become a client in our center right after their loved one passed. And so I know that we sometimes make those promises with our loved one, but I really want to say that if they have dementia and that dementia progresses, truthfully, they are beyond even remembering that. And I want caregivers to always look at your boundaries and how far you can go. And when you know that you have gone as far as you can do it and you just can't do it anymore, then I teach caregivers beyond that the choices you then make, whether it's placing them in a home or a setting, that's done out of love. It's not done out of trying to break that promise, but it's done out of love. And what you're doing is you really want the good care you've been providing to continue. And then you're able to take care of yourself and stay strong, because you have to remain strong enough to advocate over that care, to make sure they're getting good care. And then you're able to visit them and they then get the best of you again.
I would just like to second the 5 wishes, because that it includes the decisions or your information about advanced healthcare directives, but it also provides some wonderful instruction to the caregivers. I think all of us have been in a setting where we're gathered as a family, someone is ill, there are several people sitting around wanting to do something. And so the 5 wishes is, I can do these things. I know that there are 3 books that my loved one loves, so I'm going to sit and read these 3, and all of those instructions can be in it. So maybe we'll work with the Office on Aging to hold some workshops. I would be happy to do that in conjunction with the 5 Wishes booklet.
I have another question from Lanai. What qualifications are needed to become a caregiver? Does anyone know the track of training to, you talk about the nursing program, and of course we know the nursing program has multiple tiers. Mm-hmm. What do you know about qualifications needed to become a caregiver? Like, is there a legal qualification, a minimum nursing degree, or certification, as I thought I heard earlier?
So there are a lot of different types of caregiving. During this discussion, we've heard, I think, home care or visitor, or there are a lot of different types. There are some that are housekeepers and can come and do some of the daily chores. And then the job description will often indicate what type of certification is required. But it's not just nursing. There are these other home care or visiting, house care, personal care that might help with some of the hair care and personal needs like that.
In our contract with our service providers, those who provide personal care, the employee must have a minimum of a CNA, a certified nurse's assistant, that kind of certification. And for those who want to establish an adult residential care home, then that's also the minimum requirement, is to be certified as a CNA and also have worked in a medical setting, I believe, for at least 1 year. There are specific licensing requirements for a care home. Foster home, I'm not too, I think that's also the minimum requirement, but I need to double check that. And then also establishing day health facilities. I believe there's other requirements as well through the Office of Healthcare Assurance. But for the minimum requirement, I believe it's a certified nurse's assistant.
And what is the track for CNA? Are you aware? Is it a 1-year, 2-year program?
It's not a degree program. You take the required course. There is some hands-on kind of clinical hours, and then I believe there's a test.
And if it's not a academic track, where do you get information if you're interested in that?
That's a great question. I could have answered that prior to COVID. I need to do a little bit of update. I do know that Maui College provided a training, and so I will look up more information and I will send that to you.
I think there's also private service, private companies that offer that kind of training for CNA certification. And some employers may also provide that training through their program. That way, they can maintain their staff and be able to help them gain additional or get on a higher track. So I believe Hale Makua, I think they have a certification program or some track where they can start off as a CNA and then work through the program and then graduate to become an LPN. So there is that investment going on in our community to help our residents gain skills and education.
Oh, that's great. Let me just check if we have any other questions from the audience. And I needed to become a caregiver. Okay, not a question, but a suggestion from Lori. Hi, see Prometric Hawaii's website. Prometric, PROMETRIC, Hawaii's website for the list of nurse aid training and competency programs. There we have it. Wow, that was timely. Prometric Hawaii gives Hawaii's nurse aid certification exam. And she says, mahalo. Do we have any questions in the room as we near down to our last 8 to 10 minutes of the program?
Hello. My question is to Heather. I've been blessed and fortunate to look at your studies that you conducted earlier in around 2010 about intergenerational effects of what's happening, and I'm curious to see with the data that you currently have, what are the outcomes and what are the next steps in trying to generate some type of interest in helping the kupuna age in their homes? Because what I'm seeing, looking in the room right now, we've got one person who's probably below 30, and that scares me in the sense that we are aging. Statistics and the census show that we are, not only here on the islands, but in the whole country, that we will outnumber the younger population. With that said, and knowing what we know now about the labor shortage, what is our call to action?
That is a great question, and it's complicated enough that I don't know if I have an answer. What we do know is that in Hawaii, in Maui County, we have a higher average age than many areas on the mainland. We also are blessed to have one of the longest lifespans, expected lifespans. And so I'm not sure how to answer that, except to say, let's continue having conversations about it. And think about how we can, for those who are looking at what they're going to do for a career. Rowena talked about how almost any career path can have some connection to the aging population. So if someone is interested in going into medicine, there is a geriatrician. That's a specific type of physician who focuses on older adults. For computer technology, there are a lot of computer-aided tools and resources that can help people to be safer in their homes for longer. And so identifying your interests and then thinking about how, if I follow this interest, how could I then use that interest to support older adults, their families, and their safety?
Also, I think it's also changing the narrative when it comes to educating the public and not putting aging in a silo, but integrating it with other areas such as engineering or architecture. Oftentimes, we just peg it into healthcare or a social service, but really it can be anywhere because we're all affected by it. I mean, I went into initially special education, and but really the training that I received really helped me in the end because, as a caregiver, I mean that it's all integrated. So
It is integrated. The lifespan in general, having some integrative idea tied to all educational tracks, that how it relates to the lifespan. Yeah, that's great.
And Juno, when you say that you look around the room at the ages, I can say that if you were to come into daycare with some of our staff, everybody's working longer because Social Security is not going to support us with the cost of living. And so we're all trying to figure that out, how to retire and be able to do that. But when you look around the room at our staff, some of our staff are going to go from being staff to having a reserved chair and becoming a client. We all joke around about that.
I think we're going to go to our last comments since we're running out of time now. What last comments do you have for the audience here in the room, here in the rooms on the outer islands, and for our virtual audience?
So the last comment I have is that caregiving may feel isolating. Caregivers are not alone. I encourage, again, to reach out and find a few things that you can ask for of your friends and family, and also those around you. Be in contact with those who are caring for their loved ones and identify something that you can do. One of the challenges is, I think we hear this a lot, is I'm here, I want to do something, call me if there's a way I can help. Instead of asking the caregiver what they can do, identify some of your strengths and offer that.
And I'd like to say, just like Heather, it really starts with you. So take care of yourself as a caregiver and reach out for the supports. And we can talk over the phone. We can meet, and you can call and make an appointment and come in and meet with me. Caregivers call me and they yell and they scream and they swear and they cry, and I'm very non-judgmental. We know how hard this job is, but we can definitely do a lot to support you, not just in the counseling and helping you with your emotions and thoughts and ideas on how to work with your loved one and how to get through this, but referring you to resources that are out there that can also help you, financial resources so that you can have a loved one in a daycare setting. It simply starts with a call. And so you can call any one of us and reach out for help. It's why we're in place and we're here for you.
I was at the county council yesterday, and that was exactly what I said. It starts with a call. So, like what Kathy had mentioned, take care of yourself. And in caregiving, those are the things that I learned through my mom. She spent so many years taking care of other people, but she forgot that she had to take care of herself as well. And so you're not alone. we are here to support you. We have great resources in the community. It's making sure that we can help you get matched up with the right support that you need. And we know that there are gaps in the community, but we need to just work together to identify solutions and try things out. So, with more educational programs like this one, I think this really helps. It helps everyone engage in that conversation. So thank you, Akakū, for bringing this program today.
Oh, you're welcome. I have one more thing from Lori. She said, we all need to plan ahead as we age to fund how we want to live as we age. I don't know, I might be too late for that in my age, but in any
never
case,
too late.
I'd like to thank our panelists. And here's some resource information for the centers and services that they represent. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists. I will be sending more information out. We'll be sending an email out with the survey link that I'll be putting up briefly, momentarily. I did want to thank our partners, MEO and the Office of Gabe Johnson on Lanai. Him and Roxanne did an amazing job of putting together that program at the Senior Center. And MEO and our director, Daniel Emhoff on Molokai, putting a small program together on that island as well. We're going to end now. Thank you all for coming and attending. And we're going to roll our credit roll for our event here today. And then we'll all have lunch for the people who are here in person. Mahalo again for attending. And I hope to bring these people back and to see the rest of you here at another event in the future. Aloha.